praise God. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له. And we bear witness that there is no God except one God. Since I was not scheduled to give the Friday khutbah, I did not prepare anything, so I will just chat with you. And I will mix my Friday sermon with my schedule. Welcome for all of you. It is really a privilege and an honor for me to welcome the most important people on earth. You are the most important people on earth. You have come to the realization that God is omnipotent, omniscient, and He sees the path ahead of us and can make better choices than we can do. And then you decided to submit all your affairs in God's hand. And God repeatedly says in the Quran that only those who possess intelligence will come to me. As you know from your own experiences by now, it is not easy to worship God alone and to uphold the word of God alone. You have come to realize that you are a privileged minority of a minority. Better expression is elite of the elite. In the Quran, it is as-sabiqun as-sabiqun. In Surah 56, God describes the very special people who come to the realization that God alone possesses all power and decide to live their lives devoted to God alone. God is the only priority in their lives. So you can see why it is indeed an honor for me to welcome the most important people on earth. You've succeeded in attaining this worship of God alone and upholding His word alone. God says in the Quran in Surah number 3, God ordered us to say, say, Allahumma, our God. Say, Allahumma, our God. Malik al-Mulk. God described Himself as Malik al-Mulk, possessor of all possessions, possessor of all things. A repeated statement in the Quran is, Lillahi ma fis samawati wal ard. To God belongs everything in the heavens and the earth. God is Malik al-Mulk, the owner of all kingship. Nobody owns anything in the heavens or the earth. So any intelligent creature will associate himself with the one who possesses everything. He's the one who possesses all the provisions. He's the one who controls your health, your wealth, your happiness. And this is stated very clearly in Surah 54. وَأَنَّهُ هُوَ أَغْنَى وَأَغْنَى. He is the one who makes you rich or poor. He is the one who decides whether you are happy or miserable. وَأَنَّهُ هُوَ أَضْحَكَ وَأَبْكَى. He is the one who makes you happy or miserable. With the understanding that God does not make us miserable, but God's law dictates that we can make ourselves miserable according to God's law. But nobody can make you happy or miserable. Only God. And this is precisely why God says only those who possess intelligence will come to me. God says, say, Allahumma Malik al-Mulk, our God, possessor of all possessions, the owner of everything in the heavens and the earth. You give possessions to whomever you will. You give kingship to whomever you will. You remove possessions or you remove kingship from whomever you will. You remove power from whomever you will. You give dignity to whomever you will. God is the only source of dignity and respect. And you humiliate or you remove dignity from whomever you will. بيدك الخير, in your hand is all provisions, all good things. God is teaching us to say this about God. إنك على كل شيء قدير, you are omnipotent. So God is teaching us that in very simple terms, repeated throughout the Quran, that He's the only one who possesses all power. So what are we doing depending on everybody else? You are the people who decided that God is Malik al-Mulk. And as I will introduce you to each other, you're going to see that in each one of you, in the life of each one of you, there are, because you have been put to the test, and you are being put to the test. In the life of each one of you, there are demonstrations and proof that you know that only God possesses all power. You've come across the people who will try to divert you. Satan, you are the number one target of Satan. And this is in accordance with God's law. People will try to divert you and will use all kinds of tricks. And Satan will always work on you. He's not interested in those people out there who are idol worshippers or disbelievers. And one of the tricks they will use, my question is, it doesn't distract us. Verse number 2 of Surah 29 says, do the people think they will be left to say we believe without being put to the test? We have tested those before them, for God will surely distinguish those who are truthful from the liars. So this is why you have to be tested. And we never cease to be amazed at how efficient the test is. Recently, at the Mosque of Tucson, we had a number of people whom I just fell in love with, wonderful people. And I always wonder, are they strong believers? Will they make it? We will always pray for the people to make it, to pass the test. And we're pulling for them. At the same time, we're also interested in having God's test take place in order to sift away those who do not belong among us. It is not something bad, it's been happening all the time, that this sifting process, because only the pure diamonds remain. Everything else, the foam flows to the top and is removed. These seemingly very strong people were subjected to tests recently. They were told, Rashad is bad, Rashad is manipulating you. And this is by people who are sipping whiskey, as they say that. Don't listen to Rashad. It's surprising how the people who are influenced. I tell them, worship God alone, follow the word of God alone. Then somebody is sipping whiskey and telling them Rashad is bad, and say, oh, you're right, Rashad is bad, bye. They plunk the test so easy. This happens. Satan will work on your ego and will say, you're following Rashad Khalifa. And you know better, and I know better. We do not follow Rashad Khalifa. We do not follow Muhammad or Jesus. We do not follow any human being. We follow God. We know that. That's why we smile when they say that. But this is just about one of the last straws. You follow Rashad Khalifa is the polite way, but usually say you follow the crazy Rashad Khalifa. You have to add some adjective. Just to work even harder on our egos. But we make it very clear, we follow Malik al-Mulk, the possessor of all things. We follow only God. We follow only the word of God. And as you know, I'm the first one to tell you, if it is my opinion, if it is Rashad Khalifa, don't follow him. Because you'll probably do the wrong thing. If it is, you must be sure you're following God and following the word of God. And we will go to any extent to make sure that we are following God and the word of God. We're not following the words of any human being. توبوا إلى الله. الحمد لله وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له. We praise God and we bear witness that there is no God except the one God. At this rate, it seems like I will finish the Friday sermon and finish the Friday prayer before Ismail Barakat is here. Because at 2 o'clock, we have the introductions and the welcome. God says, only the intelligent come to me. And when we look at the Quran, almost every page says the only unforgivable offense, if maintained until death, is idol worship. There's only one unforgivable offense at the time of death. When a person dies and he has committed murders and lies and cheats and theft and adultery and aggression, all these are forgivable. God gave us examples in the Quran. Moses killed somebody, one of God's great prophets. There's only one unforgivable offense at the time of death, and that is idol worship, idolatry. Any person with the smallest amount of intelligence will say to himself or herself, if this is the only unforgivable offense, I'm going to avoid any suspicion of it for the rest of my life, all my life. Any hint of idol worship, I'm going to get rid of it. We look in the Quran and it says, in Surah 3, verse 18, that God begins with himself. Shahid Allah, God bears witness. أنه لا إله إلا هو, that لا إله إلا الله. This is the Shahada according to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. According to God, the Shahada is لا إله إلا الله. والملائكة and the angels, God blesses the angels after him. وأولو العلم, and also possess knowledge. So there is the Shahada in plain language, in any language, in any translation. God bears witness that the Shahada is La ilaha illallah. And so do the angels and also possess knowledge. Therefore, if I say La ilaha illallah, I'm right. So they tell you, okay, put next to it Muhammad Rasulullah. Where did this come from? Maybe it is perfectly alright, maybe. But maybe it's a maybe. Maybe it's idol worship. Maybe it's perfect. But we're not sure. And any intelligent person who knows that the only unforgivable offense is idol worship will say, since La ilaha illallah is correct, and La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah is maybe, I'm going to stick with La ilaha illallah. After all, these are the words that came out of Muhammad's mouth. He will not blame me for saying La ilaha illallah on the day of judgment. God will not blame me. And this is consistent through the Quran. In Surah Muhammad, Surah entitled Muhammad, number 47, verse 19, says, فَعْلَمْ أَنَّهُ لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا اللَّهِ. You shall know that La ilaha illallah. The Muhammadans took it and they put فَعْلَمْ أَنَّهُ لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا اللَّهِ Muhammad Rasulullah. They added it, and you'll see it here in the appendix. Know that La ilaha illallah, there's no God except Allah, Muhammad is Rasulullah, his messenger. They added it. And they put it in the calligraphy that looks like the Quran, to the point that people who memorized the Quran were fooled. They thought it was Quran. Because this kind of idolatry became so common that it became part and parcel of the people's beliefs. God says in the surah entitled Muhammad فَعَلَمْ أَنَّهُ لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا اللَّهُ. So why are they trying to push their idolatry on us? It doesn't make sense. Any intelligent person, knowing that idol worship is the only unforgivable offense, will run away from any suspicion of idolatry. So then they turn against all you and they say, why don't you believe that Muhammad is Rasulullah? Well, the fact that you uphold the Quran is the biggest proclamation that we know that Muhammad is Rasulullah. It's God's message. And we have examples that utterly destroy their arguments. The Quran is the word of God. And consistently, God puts His scriptures ahead of the messengers, the prophets, in the Quran. God describes the believers and those who believe in God, God, His angels, His scriptures, and His messengers. The scriptures, the word of God comes ahead of the messengers always in the Quran. So you can ask them, don't you believe that the Quran is the word of God? You say yes. Tell them, okay, you should say La ilaha illallah, the Quran, kalam Allah. Why don't you say, don't you believe the Quran is kalam Allah, the word of God? Why don't you say La ilaha illallah, the Quran is the word of God? See, it's the same. This completely shuts them up. They accuse you of being hating Muhammad, which is the exact opposite. They hate Muhammad. And the Quran says that only the hypocrites say Muhammad Rasulullah. They added to that. You put Muhammad's name next to God's name. You can take this to further and say, why not say La ilaha illallah? The sun rises from the east. There's no end to this. Why don't you believe the sun rises from the east? So there are millions of statements that you can put next to La ilaha illallah that are absolutely correct. But this is not the point. Verse 18 of Surah 3 says, God bears witness that La ilaha illallah. Lost my note? When they tell you follow Rashad Khalifa, if they're blind, or the crazy Rashad Khalifa, if they're normal, you tell them we follow God. We follow God alone. We follow the word of God alone. The principle is very easy. If it is not in the Quran, we have no consideration for it. In this conference, you're going to hear lots of views, personal views of many people. Anybody can say anything they want. But your criterion is the Quran. If it is not in the Quran, don't believe it. No matter who is talking to you. Very simple principle. Because this is what we follow. Even in this conference, Satan has to be represented, especially in this conference. Satan has to be represented, and you're going to hear some views and that are contrary to the Quran. And if you believe them, you deserve to believe them. There may be 2 or 3 people who will be influenced. Because the purpose of these people who are bringing views other than the Quranic views is to at least put doubt in your heart. And as long as you have doubt in your heart, you're in the lowest rank of submission. Remember the verse in Surah 49, verse 11, I believe. It says, they said we are believers. God says, do not say you're believers, say you are Muslims. Until all doubt is gone. So their job is to put even a little bit of doubt in your heart. And when this happens, you know that God is testing you, and that, unfortunately, if the doubt comes in my heart, because unfortunately I still have some doubts. So I'm still in the lowest track. I'm still on my way. It's not hopeless yet. But you must be aware of this principle. This is our principle. If it is not in the Quran, I don't believe it. It may or may not be correct. But if it is not in the Quran, I'm not following it. We have time now to do the Friday prayer and then go into. I can't linger any longer until Ismail is here. So we'll just go through with the Friday prayer. And I'm sure Ismail will get his chance to express his views. He had prepared a very good khutbah on the ink and paper. But this is not the Quran. The ink and paper, the physical book is not the Quran. The Quran is in your heart. When the Prophet Muhammad was taken to the seventh heaven to receive the Quran, God did not give him a book. Ismail here?
I waited.
Oh, he was supposed to come with you.
Yes. But I went. His flight was in. The flight from Los Angeles was in. He was not.
Okay. How about the Washington?
The Washington, I have Abdul Wahid.
Okay.
But Abdul Wahid has Shahada.
Wakili, Valencia, Amin.
They were supposed to be basically the flight was supposed to be at the same time.
I'm glad you brought Dr. Thomas Abari here. He's honored. And where's Abdul Wahid? Brother Abdul Wahid, that's you. Welcome to the conference. So looks like Ismail, we do believe that he'll be late for his own funeral. And now it is confirmed.